Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Horror Mine. My name is Vic Shy, and this is the Scare Score, where I break down horror movies and rate them on how scary I think they are. In this episode, I'll be going over the 2019 Taiwanese horror film, Detention. Detention is based on the 2017 game of the same name developed by Red Candle Games. Small disclaimer, I played the game when it first released a long time ago and never got to finish it. I didn't have time to dive back in before this video, so I won't really have the game as a reference and will be talking about the movie on its own merit. The film is set in 1962 Taiwan during a time known as the White Terror. The White Terror was a period of martial law in the country that lasted 40 years from 1947 until 1987. It started with the February 28 incident, also known as the 228 Massacre. During this time, the government banned several books that reflected communist views, spoke of the 228 Massacre, or those that could spark further rebellion against the government. A very turbulent and violent period in Taiwanese history that sets the grim stage of Detention's setting. Detention is based on an excellent indie survival horror game that was genuinely frightening. But how scary is it? Sit back and relax and join me as we explore Detention and tally up the Scare Score. Our movie begins with our main character Fong Rei-shin walking to Greenwood High School. A man over the PA system says that espionage, or those associated with concealing it, is punishable by death. A student named Cheng gets stopped by a military instructor named Inspector Bai for wearing his hat the wrong way. Inspector Bai asks to look inside his bag and his friend Wei shows up to save the day. He takes out a puppet that he isn't supposed to have in school, but this stops the instructor from finding out about a banned book he also has in his possession, which would lead to a considerably worse punishment. We see the students marching to salute the flag, which really highlights the heavily militarized setting for the time. Wei heads to a hidden storeroom at the top of the school where a secret book club has been formed. The students are risking their lives by reading and copying text from the materials banned by the government. Sometime later, Wei is being tortured by the government, who found out about the book club. On the brink of death, he loses consciousness and wakes up to find himself in a dark alternate version of the high school. The first chapter is appropriately titled Nightmare. Ray wakes up in a classroom in the same nightmarish alternate reality, and we get several shots that look exactly like the video game. We get the same almost black and white filter, as if all the color and happiness has been sapped from the world. The atmosphere and setting are established perfectly, and it's awesome to see it faithfully adapted from the game. She hears a girl simultaneously giggling and crying in one of the classrooms and decides it's time to put a little more pep in her step. She sees a man named Mr. Cheng walking away and follows him. He walks into a room and the door locks behind him. She hears the girl crying directly behind her, who appears to be a dark, faceless version of Ray. Faceless Ray slowly approaches her until Ray retreats into the empty auditorium. A voice eerily says the country will be grateful to you before she sees two very disturbing hallucinations. One is of her hanging in front of an applauding crowd with masks over their heads. The second is of someone in a chair getting shot. She slowly approaches the stage before Wei enters the room. This was a pretty decent scare scene that uses its setting and unique premise to craft its scares, especially the part where Ray sees herself hanging after the ominous voice speaks. The brief flash of the disturbing sight was enough to give me chills. They walk outside the school and see a grave that appears nameless, but Ray sees her own name written on it. They try to leave the school grounds, but the road is completely cut off, Silent Hill style. They formally introduce themselves, although Wei already knows who she is and clearly has a crush on her. Ray is aware of the secret book club, which has Wei a little worried. A phone rings in one of the offices and someone eerily tells them to get out of there. Ray thinks it was Mr. Cheng trying to contact them, and they go to his office. His desk and that of a teacher named Miss Yin have been tossed and searched. Wei finds a conversation between Mr. Cheng and Ray on a piece of paper, and she quickly snatches it from him. Her face becomes slightly distorted in the mirror, leading to a predictable jump scare. They continue wandering the school looking for clues, which feels very survival horror video game-like, something I haven't seen well executed since the first Silent Hill movie adaptation. They find a paper that says "In Mourning" eerily posted in front of Ray's classroom. They go searching for the storeroom key, and Wei reveals that Mr. Cheng was part of the secret book club. They head to the custodian's office named Mr. Gao and ask to borrow his keys. Mr. Gao reveals that he got tortured and charged with insurgency for letting Wei borrow the key to the storeroom. His face is now completely disfigured as a result of the torture, and I don't think he's letting anyone borrow any keys. He chases the pair and says that that killing Wei will show his loyalty to the party. The scene in Mr. Gao's office and the chase that follows are suspenseful, but not really scary. They hide inside of a bathroom stall and something terrifying happens outside. Mr. Gao is taken out by a large spirit holding a lantern who quotes the same lines as the man over the PA in the beginning. We then get a super suspenseful scene where the lantern ghost walks right in front of the stall. His footsteps sound very heavy and chains drag behind his feet as he walks. The key falls out of Wei's pocket, but Rei catches it just in time and the spirit walks off. The sound design in this scene is excellent. Simply hearing the spirit walking sounded terrifying. They exit the stall and Rei sees herself walking past, which leads to a brief flashback between her and Mr. Chang. They head to the storeroom and see several books on the ground covered in blood. While they are in an alternate nightmarish reality, the setting reflects events that occurred in the real world. Wei sees the head of one of Shang's puppets and realizes something terrible has happened to the book club that was started by Mr. Chang. We see a flashback involving Mr. Chang where we are introduced to Miss Yin, another teacher and founder of the book club. The military police arrive at the school and a teacher named Mr. Huang gets forcefully taken away with a bag over his head. The book club are worried that they will torture a confession out of him. Miss Yin trusts he won't tell the government about the book club, just like she trusts everyone in the room. Wei insists that they continue sneaking and copying books, and the group reluctantly agrees. On his way out, him and Rei bump into each other and all of his books fall to the ground. This is the moment she learned he was part of the club. He asks if she is going to tell anyone and she pretends like nothing happened. It's not what I asked. I asked, are you gonna fucking tell anyone? They decide to go look for Mr. Chang in an old bomb shelter used by the club. Wei encounters another student named Wen Xiang burning the banned books over a CAMPFIRESONG song, and if you don't think that we can sing it faster, then you're wrong, but it'll help if you just sing along. Wen Xiang reveals that Instructor Bai knows about the club and believes that Shang ratted out the club, Shang being the kid with the puppet in his bag in the beginning. He breaks down in tears and says that they were only reading books. The lantern ghost suddenly appears and grabs Wen Xiang by the neck. A bag slowly forms over his head and he is choked out by the ghost. The spirit starts chasing them and is pretty much a nightmarish version of Inspector Bai. He stops chasing them and Rei sees a noose briefly appear. This scene didn't offer up too much in the scare department. I think that showing the lantern ghost wasn't a great idea. There's nothing wrong with his design, I just don't find him scary. The scene where he was introduced was far more intense and scarier. This scene would have been scarier if they had his arm grab Wen Xiang from the trees and not do a full reveal. They arrive at the bunker and find the rest of the book club hiding there. Miss Yin says that Rei was the one who sold out the club to Inspector Bai and got the entire club killed. The club members disappear as their photos appear on the wall one by one. Mr. Chang's photo appears on the wall, meaning he is also dead. Wei asks Rei to tell him what happened, but she runs off. He walks out and finds himself in a hallway lined with large "in mourning" signs. Rei finds herself in the same hallway as the beginning and watches herself being chased by her dark self. She suddenly becomes her dark self, showing that she is stuck in some type of loop. This scene offered a decent amount of tension and scares. The scariest aspect of all this is the environment that is created with each dark revelation about the story and what happened in the real world. The second chapter is titled The Boeing Whistleblower. We get a peek into Fang's tragic home life where her drunken father was abusive towards her mom. Her mother began praying to Buddha for a way to escape the abusive marriage. We learn that Fang's father works in the military and is up for a promotion. Inspector Bai speaks to her and asks her to tell him if she learns of anything suspicious. Mr. Chang intervenes and takes her to his office. This is where we see that the two had more than just a student-teacher relationship, if you know what I mean. A relationship that appears to be the best thing going on in her life, considering the whole abusive home life and martial law situations. Rei returns home to find that the authorities are at her house and her father is being arrested. Rei clearly cares a lot about her father and watches him being taken away with a bag over his head. She tells her mom to contact Inspector Bai, but quickly learns that she is the one who got her own husband arrested, something that seemed very avoidable if he hadn't, I don't know, cheated on and abused his wife. She goes to Mr. Chang for comfort and says spending time with him is the only thing she looks forward to now. He gifts her a necklace and she falls asleep in his house only to wake up in the nightmarish world of Greenwood High, bringing bringing us back to the beginning of the film. We then get yet another flashback, which I initially found a little annoying, but finally accepted that this is how the film is telling its story. Miss Yin questions Mr. Chang on his relationship with Ray and fears it'll jeopardize the book club by bringing unwanted attention. Ray overheard their conversation and believed the two were in a relationship. Mr. Chang then stopped hanging out with Ray to keep the book club safe. Back in the present time, Wei is in the morning hall and hears a loud banging sound. He follows the sound into a really creepy room full of puppets. The sound is coming from a sealed closet with "Death to the Betrayer" written on it. He finds Shang inside crying and bloodied, most likely having been assaulted by the book club members who thought he ratted them out. Wei gives him back the puppet head, which leads to a really unsettling scene. The puppet has the same facial injuries as Shang and he mimics Inspector Bai executing him. Shang swears that he didn't tell anyone about the books and blames Wei for betraying the club. The other club members appear above them, hanging like Miss Chokes on Dick's bosoms. Inspector Bai appears behind him and Shang gets head in the shot. Inspector Bai says that they are currently in a world where the dead belong and a body appears behind him. He then finds himself hanging upside down and Ray walks into view. Inspector Bai hands her a knife and we get a super bloody scene involving said knife in his throat. Another flashback reveals that Ray asked Wei for one of the books. Because he had a crush on her, he gave her the book, which she then gave to Inspector Bai to get rid of Miss Yin and save her father. This event is also portrayed in the nightmare world in a much more gruesome manner.
国家会感谢你的。
Satisfied with her handiwork, she goes to see a movie with Mr. Chang, which turns out to be a film on the consequences of her actions. Mr. Chang and Miss Yin are taken away by the military police and we get a jump scare of Mr. Chang wearing a bag over his head. She finds herself surrounded by numerous victims of the regime and sees Mr. Chang being sentenced to death. The spirits of the book club members call her a murderer and she says she only wanted Mr. Chang and Miss Yin to break up. Her jealousy resulted in numerous deaths and eventually led to her own. A noose appears directly in front of her and we learn that Ray deleted herself from the thing we called life out of guilt from what she did. The entire film has been Ray's spirit going through a nightmarish version of the real-life tragic events that led to her death and many others. The brief disturbing visions she's been having were trying to get her to confront the truth of what happened. Her spirit has been reliving these same events in the nightmarish loop until she finally accepts and takes responsibility for her actions. Ray speaks with Mr. Chang, who says that she can't undo what she did. They did not live to see freedom, but she has a chance to save Wei and help him escape this world. Wei is still being tortured in real life and has been unconscious in the nightmarish world this entire time. While Inspector Bai reads out the decree of the guilty club members, Ray unties Wei and helps him escape. Thick Scheiß, Dad. Wait, so that's what happened to him? Wei is grabbed by ghostly hands that try and drag him away. Ray is grabbed by the lantern ghost and Inspector Bai tries getting her to forget what happened. Ray refuses to forget and accepts responsibility for her actions. Ray is apparently way stronger than a dozen ghostly hands and manages to pull him away. Wei climbs over the gate and Ray tells him that she cannot go with him. She is already dead and he must live on and keep fighting for freedom. The school becomes completely consumed in darkness and Ray along with it. This was a decent climax that, much like the rest of the film, didn't offer too much in the scare department. The film's momentum definitely shifted from the creepiness of the environment and horror setting to a much more story-focused drama with tiny bits of horror elements. Not necessarily a bad thing because that's what the film was going for, but it would have been nice to have a better balance of both. Wei regains consciousness back in his cell in the real world. He decides to confess and is allowed to go on living. The final chapter is titled The Walking Dead: The Ones Who Live. Years later, Wei is now much older and visits Mr. Chang's grave. He goes back to Greenwood High, which is set to be sold and demolished. We see a flashback between the two right before Mr. Chang's execution. Mr. Chang says that Wei needs to live no matter what. Old Man Wei goes looking for a book called The Symbol of Anguish hidden in the school that contains a letter written by Mr. Chang. He then goes to the classroom and comes face to face with Ray's spirit. He gives Ray the letter written by Mr. Chang, which says he will be waiting for her in the next life. Hopefully by that time, their relationship is a little more age appropriate. In the film's final scene, Wei tells him that he is always going to remember what happened. She puts on Mr. Chang's necklace and a tear of joy falls down her face. The last part of the letter reads, "Freedom!" as the movie ends. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was Detention. My friends, this was a pretty good film and adaptation of an excellent horror video game. The horror elements started out really strong and created a terrifying atmosphere that mirrored the video game. However, as the film went on, it became really flashback heavy and focused heavily on the story rather than horror. Don't get me wrong, the film had a great story to tell, and I found the storytelling elements to be really unique. The way bits and pieces of what was really going on reflected in the nightmarish world was really cool. I just wish we had a lot more of it. This is a great movie with a really engaging and tragic story. It's just lacking in the scare department and not a great horror movie as a result, earning Detention a disappointing scare score of 37%. I still definitely recommend Detention because it's a great film with hints of horror brilliance. It just chooses to focus more on its tragic story, which was still very entertaining to watch. The scariest scene in the film is when Ray and Wei hide from the lantern ghost inside the bathroom stall. It's a terrifying scene that is full of tension and suspense. Just hearing the lantern ghost's heavy footsteps and dragging the chain as he walks was scary, but that was the beginning, and unfortunately, nothing after that scene comes remotely close to being that scary. But as always, I hope you all enjoyed the video. Thank you all for tuning in, and I cannot wait to see y'all right back here in the horror mine. Y'all stick around.